right. So welcome to, I guess I'm calling this Armand Chats with somebody or something like that. And I wanted to have my lovely wife on to ask her some pointed questions. Really grill her, you know what I'm saying? Put the heat on. You can't see this in the video, but there's a giant spotlight just shining right in her face, making her very uncomfortable.
Yeah, I'm very uncomfortable.
Yes. So we're gonna try not to we're gonna try to get some conversation here, but try not to say mean things about me or anything. I think that's all that we need. First off, okay, so you are not, I think you've said so you're not a creative person. You were more of a numbers person.
Yes. Yeah, I'm not so good with the I guess the idea part of creating stuff. Like I can come up with the idea, but the implementing and putting it together, maybe not so much. Um, I think that's like why I like, for example, baking, because it's very precise, measurements and everything to get the product you need. Same thing with numbers.
Hmm.
Math is math. Two plus two will always be four. So numbers work for me because I can get to an exact end product and everything else, as opposed to, being creative and artistic where it's more open to interpretation and it could go one way and then go to another way and the end doesn't have to have a certain outcome. That
Right.
part I'm not so good with.
So we've been together for a dozen years.
How long?
A dozen years.
Oh, I thought you said seven. I was like, well, that's not right. Yeah, a dozen, that's
We've been together
correct.
about six years. Um, so obviously when we started dating, I was already a full-time author. And um I like how when we first started dating, you were like, I don't like horror. I don't want to read horror. And I gave you a bunch of my horror books, and you're like, well, that's not crazy bad. I don't write splatterpunk or, you know, weird fiction or any of that stuff. But now going, hey Maisie, now what you know now as opposed to then, like how has your outlook on as a reader, how has it changed that you're married to a full-time author and you know a lot of authors and you know how kind of the ins and outs of writing and publishing and all this stuff. Were there things that in the beginning you had no idea that were good or no idea that were bad?
Um, a big one is the fact that there's so many levels of horror. That was a big one for me to learn because, again, when I say I don't like horror, I immediately think of like what you see in the movies, which is as much blood and guts, and the serial killer who can't be killed, and is chasing the kids through the woods and just gore for the sake of gore. And that's what I didn't like.
Right.
But understanding there's so many different levels, while there is that part of it, then there's also the part where it's more of the psychological part. There is the horror part where people are, can get killed and there's a serial killer, but it doesn't have to be all the graphic blood and guts part of it. So when I used to say I don't like horror, there's a certain part of that's still true to a certain part of horror, but then there is actually stuff that I enjoy. So that's changed a lot. Um, Obviously, the ins and outs of publishing and writing and editing and all of that kind of stuff. Um, as a reader, I just get a finished product and it's done, and I get to read the book, and then I just get to enjoy it, and I'm done. Being with you, beta reading books for you, you going through the editing process, um, having to come up with your cover idea, having to come up with your blurb in the back, having to come up with the title, having to come up with the characters' names. I always love when I'm at work and I'll get a message from you that's like, I need a guy's name that starts with a G. And I'm like, and then I come up with something. And I know when I read that book later, I'm going to see that name,
Right.
and it's really cool and stuff like your First Coast series where your main characters' names are my two grandfathers' names. So you named him, is Clayton Conway, which was Clayton is my mom's dad and Conway was my dad's dad. So stuff like that's really cool. Which being just a reader, you never got that personal insight stuff. As far as what's different now that I know writers and read their books, a lot of times you see their personality in it, and it can make the funny stuff funnier. It also can make certain scenes like more just like I'm like, why would he write this? What's wrong with him? How is that in his head? Because you know him. And now when I
Right.
see like certain writers, I'm like, next time I read your book, I don't want any scenes like that in it. That's too far, or that's too much, or stuff like that. We joke about. And the bad part is sometimes it's that they say don't meet your heroes is if you read a book and you like it, and then you meet the author and you don't like the author, then it makes it really hard to read their books because you're like, well, that guy was a jerk, or this lady was kind of rude and snooty. And so then when you're reading their stuff, you're just in the back of your mind when there's a character that says a certain thing or does a certain thing, and you're like, that's probably based on them because they were a jerk when I met them.
Right.
And that makes it a difference as well when you get to meet the writer of a book that you read. If you like them, great. It's fun to see them in the book. And if you didn't care for them, it can ruin a book for you because you don't really like them, and it makes it hard. For me, it makes it hard to enjoy their body of work. That's like with movies and stuff. I don't really like to watch a lot of interviews. I don't like to read a lot of interviews about actors that I really like their movies because I'm afraid I'm not going to like them and it's going to ruin the movies for me.
Yeah.
Because then I'm going to be like, oh, I just hate that guy. So that's been the difference because before I didn't know any writers, any authors, so I could pick up any book and read it and just enjoy the book for the sake of the book. And now kind of being a little bit more on the end with certain people, because of you and meeting people at conventions and stuff. Um, or you interviewing people and I get to hear the interview because you recorded here at the house. So I can't help but to hear sometimes.
Right.
Then that makes a difference because I'm finding out stuff and I'm like, that person was weird, or that person was a kind of mean, or why would they agree to get on an interview if they're barely going to say 4 words and act like they're inconvenienced? And then it changes the way I feel about their books. So kind of a catch 22. There's good and bad. If you like the person, it's great. If you find that you don't like the person, then that's not so great because if you really love the series or something beforehand, you may find that you don't want to read it so much afterwards.
Yeah. No, that's always the struggle, right? I mean, when we first started dating, we were going, I knew a lot of people, but I didn't know a lot of people. And then to be going to conventions and book signings and different things. And yeah, you start to find the people that you like, that I surround myself with. And then there's those jerks that I try to keep at arm's length and not have to deal with. Um,
Yeah.
which is not fun. But you've met a lot of writers that you read their stuff, you're friendly with.
Which I
So
was going to say, the fortunate thing is the majority is I like the author. You know what I mean? It's not like the majority of them. I'm like, well, I met like 32 authors, and now there's 30 people I can't read their books anymore because I didn't like them. It's
right,
it's very rare that there's somebody that just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. It's not like it's every person, but I'm just saying, on that rare occasion that you meet somebody that just kind of comes off as a jerk, that can happen. Thank goodness that's not the norm. But it also going to the conventions and meeting a lot of writers. I've read a lot of the stuff that I would have never found before, because most of my books come from Amazon. So I'm on there searching, and I search by keywords of stuff that I'm looking for. I like the suspense. I like a little bit of humor. I like a thriller, and so there's a lot of authors that I've gotten to meet and find their stuff and read it that I probably would have never stumbled across in all the searching in Amazon because there's so many books on there.
right.
So it's been really great that I've gotten to explore and meet and read new authors' books that I would have missed out on, by doing this. And so that's been really great. A great part of this is getting to explore stuff I probably would have missed, and if I hadn't met you and gotten more involved with the writing stuff because of you.
Right. So over the last 5 or 6 years, um, I've transitioned mostly to crime thriller and thriller stuff.
Which is my probably number one preferred genre that I was reading the most anyway before we ever met.
Right. So now I know when I first wrote Dirty Deeds,
Yeah.
I asked you a ton of questions because I had read a ton of crime thrillers, but most of the stuff I had read was the classics, Chandler and Elmore Leonard and Dashiell Hammett, those types of authors. And so for me, I was not reading um, anybody that you were really reading, and I thought it was great. We were talking about. I asked you about Janet Ivanovic, and you were basically like, basically you were like, it's the characters.
Mhm.
It's not the plot. I mean, the plot has something to do with it, but you're reading them for the characters, for their relationships, for the different things. And for me, writing horror for 20 something years, it was all about the murder. It was all about the characters in constant fear of getting killed, or the monster or whatever. So for me, that was a learning experience when I started Dirty Deeds. And now it's weird when I'm writing horror stuff, because I have to like kind of change my focus and go, no, 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 we got to write this a different way now, which is weird. So when I started writing the crime thriller stuff, were you happy that I was doing stuff that you actually like to read?
Well, I like to read your other stuff. Like I said, I realized that horror was not the only thing that I thought it was. It wasn't just this one thing that I was like, oh, I don't like that. So I liked your other stuff, but do I like the crime thriller stuff a little more? Yeah, because it's more of what I'm used to reading. I do remember when we first started talking about you switching to crime thrillers, the first thing I had to say to you was, you can't kill everybody. Like you cannot do that in a crime thriller. You can kill the bad guy. You can kill whoever the mysterious person is that's going to kick off your crime thriller and start the mission, and that kind of stuff. But you can't kill off all your characters, which I know in
Right,
horror, it's like, oh, I can kill everybody. I'm like, you can't do that because in crime thrillers, especially nowadays, because it is the characters are number one, the plot and the story is number two. And so when your fans are reading your stories and getting invested, and all of a sudden you get rid of one of them, like people will just stop reading. Like
yeah,
and the fans of that genre will just be like, well, no, I'm not doing this anymore. And it's not to say that if the story really, really calls for it, like you're writing a 20-book series and it gets to a point where like a secondary character does get sick or gets in solving whatever case they're solving, something happens. It's not
right,
that it can never happen. You got to be really selective about it, and it's got to really, really be important and
okay,
affect your main character. But like I told you, reading some of the series that I read, like I couldn't tell you what happened in book 2 or book 15. I probably, if you reminded me, well, it's the one about this, I could probably say, oh yeah, I remember what happened. But I can tell you everything about every character in the series. I can tell you who their mom is, who their dad is, who they dated, who the love interest is, what kind of trouble they've got in, what's the little thing that kind of reoccurs in all the books, what's the trouble that they get themselves in, like all of that stuff because that's the characters. But I like that you're writing crime thrillers. Like I said, I like I'm not going to say everything you've written because there's a few things I won't read that are a little out there,
there's a few
but I
things I,
like
I
what
don't
I've
want you to
read.
ever read.
Yeah, but I like what I've read, but crime thrillers is really my thing. So when I wasn't reading your stuff or somebody that I had met at a convention that I was like, you know what, I really like that person, I want to read their stuff. Um, I would always gravitate right back to crime thrillers. So it's kind of cool now that I get to read the crime thrillers and it's your books, so
Right,
it's not I'm reading your stuff and when I get done with your next book that you just came out with, I'm going to go find me a crime thriller. It's, oh well, I'm reading a crime thriller while I'm reading your book.
yeah,
So that was, that's kind of cool, and I enjoy it. And I think that you as you every series that you write, you're doing better and better with developing the characters, which is such the strong part of the story.
yeah.
But again, there's certain things that I'll read and I'll say, you can't do this. Like your character can't go through that. Like this is a more of a psychological thing, a thriller, or this is a horror thing, or this is. But in what you're writing, which is like a mainstream crime thriller, there's just certain, I guess, as you guys, taboos and tropes and whatever you call it. There's just certain things. I'm like, you can't do that. Your fans will like lose their
Right.
minds if you do that. There's just certain things that don't fit. And that's been it's been fun to go through that with you. I remember I was reading one of the books you wrote, I think with Tom, and I got to a point and I'm reading it and I just like crossed out and put big X's and I just wrote no. And when you were going through my edits and you're like, what's I'm like, you can't put any of this in here. You're going way too far. This
Yeah.
is way too much. This is you guys forgot you're writing crime thriller and you went back to your horror days.
Yeah.
And so it's just funny because I'm reading it and I'm like, what is this? This can't go in this book. This is a totally different type of book, you know? So it's funny to see when you guys kind of like you're reading your stuff and when that one you did with Tom is kind of seeing where your line is getting blurred a little
And that
bit.
was
And I
me.
have
And
to kind of go,
that was me doing that. That was
yeah,
me slipping into, oh, this would be really cool, but like as a horror thing where these people are just so over the top aggressive and ridiculous. And you were once I was like, what are you talking? And once I read it back, I was like, oh yeah, this is just this doesn't even fit with what we're doing. This character is just too much.
well, a lot of the mainstream crime thrillers, it's like that thing you go back to, you know, like an 80s movie, right? A girl and a guy are making out, the lights kind of dim. You come back and a girl and a guy are laying there, and you know what happened, but you don't go into detail. And like you'll be writing like a scene where somebody's going to die, and I'm like, yeah, you can't really paint that picture
Right.
the way that you're used to painting that picture. I'm like, it has to be that. Oh my God, the bad guy found them in a parking lot. And then the next scene is somebody, it's a Law and Order opening. Somebody walks into the alley and finds the dead body. You
Yeah.
saw the guy do it. You knew they were going to get killed, and then they're dead. And
Yeah.
all that stuff in the middle is stuff that will be revealed along the way, maybe, but
Right. Well,
you
and
can't paint
you
that
leave
picture.
you leave it to the reader's imagination
Yeah,
a lot more than I will say. In all fairness, I also can write noir, and you
yeah,
kill everybody in a noir book. So
yes. That and again, that's why in every genre there are so many differences. But
right,
those are harder for me, you know, me personally, to
right,
read because you know, and I always say this, I watch a ton of investigation discovery, as you know, because you watch so much of it with me, get
yep,
suckered into it.
yep,
I like to see somebody get their comeuppance. I like to see the bad guy get caught. I like to know. And in a noir, your main character isn't necessarily the good guy. They don't have to necessarily be a bad guy, but they're not necessarily a good guy. And maybe in the end, nobody really gets their comeuppance. You know what I mean?
right.
Like bad things
Yeah,
can happen.
nobody could win.
Right. And so for me, I'm like, oh, I've read a couple of noir books and I don't hate them by any means. But again, we all have something we prefer. Like you love to read a biography, you love to read, you know, like nonfiction and all of that. And you know, so we all have things we prefer. So I will say though that because you're a writer, I've definitely broadened what I read, and I've read a lot of stuff outside of what I would normally pick for myself
Right.
by meeting writers at conventions, you recommending some stuff that you're like, I know this isn't something you normally read, but I think you would like it. You know, reading your stuff, and then getting to also help you as you're writing in a new genre come up with some stuff.
It's interesting for me because some stuff I really like, and
Hmm.
I'll say like S.A. Cosby, Jordan Harper. There's certain thriller, uh, more like they straddle that line of noir and crime thriller stuff. And I'll say to you, I love this, and I'll give it to you to read, and it hits different sometimes
Oh,
for
because
the
I'll
both of
say,
us.
yeah, it was good.
Right.
I wasn't in love with it the way you're in love with it,
Yeah.
but it was good. But I noticed that a lot of that is, I think a lot of that is based in character, right? They write a lot of standalones, and it is about the character to a certain extent. You know what I mean?
Right.
But a lot of their characters are so very flawed. And a lot of their books are a little dark in a lot of places. And that's, again, one of the ways that you and I are different. I like something a little lighter. I like something with a little bit of humor. You know what I mean? I love a series. You know, I like to see the character go through things and grow and come out the other side. I like all of that stuff. So those books that you're drawn to, I think they're always a little bit darker than what I usually read. So
Right.
while I read it and I can enjoy it, right? That's never something that you could turn into a series, and I could read 5 or 6 books like that.
Right.
You know what I
But
mean?
again, I cannot read a cozy mystery.
Right.
I don't like all the humor. I don't like cats and dogs solving cases. I don't like
Because
any of
you're a
that stuff.
grouchy old man.
Right. I prefer the darker stuff. But there's that sweet spot in the middle that we both we both
The
like
cat
to
doesn't solve the mystery.
Oh, see, then maybe I'll start reading them. I thought the cat.
There's just a cat maybe in the book. No, you
Oh,
know what? I do read a cozy mystery, but I only typically will do that after I read something that I feel is very dark or very I don't know, creepy, very disturbing or
right.
whatever. Then sometimes I'll like take a total break from that and I'll read something and I know they're cheesy. It's like a Hallmark movie. I know it's cheesy. I know what's going to happen. I'm still going to watch it. You know what I
Right.
mean? It's
Yeah.
the same thing with a cozy mystery. I remember one time I was driving to Atlanta for work and I was listening to a book about a haunted house. You know, so I'm on this lone highway. You know, it's freaking dark as crap. There's nobody around. I'm by myself and in the book, you know, because I listen to audiobooks, they're doing the creaking doors, you know, and the wind howling, and I'm in the car and I'm like, holy crap, you know. And so all it takes is one thing, right? Like all of a sudden there's something on the side of the road that startles me, or you know, something happened. And I remember I like got freaked out, like listening to this book, hearing all the sounds. And so like it was near the end of the book, and I'm like, all right, I got like 30 minutes left of this book. But when I finished that book, I was like, yeah, I got to listen to something like totally like
Right. Yeah.
just kind of goofy, cheesy after that because I can't go to the hotel and try to go to sleep. And the last thing I listened to was this haunted house book,
Right.
you know, kind
Well,
of
like,
thing. So,
and you know, like at night, I don't like to watch Investigation Discovery before I
mhm.
go to bed, especially if it's like murder and stuff, because I'll have nightmares, not necessarily about the case or whatever happened, but something will stick into my mind and it'll bother me all throughout the night. So we watch just random other stuff. Like the last hour, I'm awake, we'll watch something else random.
I don't like to watch any of your shows before I go to bed or at any other time in the day, if that matters that you know to you. I don't want to watch the Blind Frog Ranch or what's the other one I can't absolutely tolerate.
Skinwalker Ranch.
Skinwalker. I don't want to watch those no matter what time of day it is, just so you know. So
All
I'm
right,
okay
so
that you don't want to watch Investigation Discovery right before bed.
yeah. All right, so my last question
Yes.
is give the viewers three authors that you would recommend besides me, of course.
Besides you,
Yeah.
you know, one of my very favorites is Alan Eskins.
Hmm.
I read his The Life We Bury, and it was like just wonderful. I mean, it was just an amazing book to me. I loved it. I've read everything that he's put out. Um, and he's like one of my favorites. And I also, side note, I believe you said he's supposed to be at BoucherCon
It'll
this
be a
year.
BoucherCon in September.
I am so excited to get to meet him. Excuse me, Alice was jumping on me. I had to pick her up. So he's definitely on the list as someone who I absolutely love to read. Um, Now, am I picking, you know, like people that I know that I
No,
can tell
just
you about, or
three authors that you,
that
anytime they
anytime they
put
put a book
something
out,
out,
I'm going to read it?
immediate buys of these authors.
J.D. Kirk.
Right.
You know, he wrote my Scottish thriller series with DCI Logan. I believe book 19 was out. It was one of those when and you know, again, for me, most everything is audible. I'm traveling so much, I'm gone so much. I would say 90% of everything I do is audible. I do read some, but most of it is audiobook. So I started that series. It was just kind of a fluke. I came across it. Um, it's it's got a Scottish narrator. So at first I started listening and I was like 5 minutes in. I'm like, I don't think I can listen to this because I was having a really hard time. I stuck it out after about chapter two or three. It kind of clicked where I was like figuring out the pattern of the speech and everything. And then I like fell in love with that series. Typically when I read a series, I can do the first book, then I take a break and read something else, and later on I'll do the second book.
Right.
I started that series. I think at the time when I started it, only book 15 was out. And I listened to like all 15 books right in a row. I like could not stop listening. So I love that series. Absolutely loved it. And
Right.
I've listened to almost everything he's put out since then. And my third author that I read everything or listen to everything they come out is I don't know because I have so many other series that I listen to, and so many authors that I really like. You know, obviously, I got friends of ours who write books, and so I read their books when they come out. You know, again, it's funny stuff. Like I like Mr. Frank's books because they make me laugh. I like Chuck's books because I see some of Chuck's personality in it. So Chuck Buddha books because I like to see his personality, but he also writes some crime thrillers, and it's some characters that he really does that I enjoy. Um, Tom Duffy, like I haven't read everything of his, but like his Zodiac book, I really enjoyed,
Right.
the book that he put out. So we've got a lot of people that we know that write that when they put something out, the good thing is they know me enough to know, Shelly, not this one. You're not going to want to read
Yeah.
this one
Yeah.
because sometimes they do get the splatter punk or they get way out there and it may
Yeah.
not be my cup
Frank
of tea.
Adler writes some
And he'll
crazy,
tell me that,
crazy
or
stuff.
he'll
And
write something and he'll go, "This one you can read. This one you'll
yeah.
enjoy." So I like all of those. Those are a lot of writers that we know, and there's a ton more, writers that we know that I read their stuff. But as far as mainstream, I don't know who I would say for a third writer. I've read Nick Harvey series. I've been listening to that, which I've enjoyed so far. Um,
Which Nicholas Harvey one?
the one with the
Summer?
summer,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
and because he's got more than one series, but that's the one I've been listening to. Um, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot out there. I mean, again, I could open up my Audible account and I have 300 and something books on there. And while I haven't listened to all of them yet, I'm working my way through it.
Right.
But definitely the two that I've probably listened to the most is because I went through that J.D. Kirk 20 book series in probably 6, 7 months. So I listened to that pretty
Yeah.
quickly. Alan Eskins, he puts out about a book a year now. And I listen to that like, I pre-buy those. They download the day they're done and I'm in
Yeah.
it. Obviously I listen to your stuff, that I don't read first, because everything that you write for, your like monster series books, your big
The
monster
Severed
books.
Press stuff. Yeah.
I don't always get to read those before they go out, but they come out on audio. So I listen to those instead. So I
Right.
get to do that as well with you, which is always fun. So I'm open to so much when it comes to reading books. Like I said, there's a few things that I'm just like, yeah, I'm not good in sci-fi at all. I'm not good in fantasy at all. So if that's your cup of tea, not to be rude, it's just I don't want to read a book that I know I'm not going to really like because
Right.
I just don't enjoy it.
Yeah.
So even though we run into sci-fi authors and I say, I really appreciate that you want to let me read one of your books, I don't want to read it just to tell you I don't enjoy it because sci-fi is not my thing.
Right.
Like don't set yourself up to be disappointed. But anything in a crime thriller, even a little bit of horror, the cozy mysteries, all of that stuff, I'll give it all a try. It's not all great, but some of it really is, and you get surprised and find somebody that you weren't expecting
Yeah.
out there. So number three is a hodgepodge of all the authors that I've gotten to meet
Everybody
and enjoy
else. All
their
right.
work.
I appreciate you coming on. This was a test for us, for me to figure out how to start doing these because obviously I had done podcasts before. I did 400 episodes of Armcast. Chuck Buda and I did 333 episodes of the Mondo Method podcast, and I've done other podcasts. So this is not a podcast. This is just me having a chat with people. So I appreciate you coming on. And
Real
then
quick, you say a test, I say setting the bar.
right, that's what I meant
Okay.
to say. That's what I meant to say. And now we're gonna end this, and then we need to figure out what we're gonna do with this chicken for dinner.
All
Thank you,
right, sounds
thank you
good.
for coming on.
I'll meet you in the kitchen.
I'll meet you in the kitchen.